This morning, Luke Hildyard, author of Enough, Why It's Time to Abolish the Super Rich, and director also of the, that's not me, the High Pay Centre, and Sophia Worringer, who's Deputy Policy Director at the Centre for Social Justice. Good morning to the two of you.
Morning.
Good morning.
What happened to the country whilst I was away? I said to you both, look after it whilst I'm away. It's all gone horribly wrong. It's interesting. Obviously, we've been talking about the riots. Keir Starmer now saying that actually quick sentencing has had a massive impact. I'd love to know where the prison places came from, by the way, because we didn't have any when I left on holiday, and now we appear to have loads of them. And then suddenly, if you want sentencing to happen, you can make it happen overnight. So it seems very odd to me that when there's a political will, there's a way.
I think it will feel very unfair for lots of victims who have been waiting for trials against their perpetrators for things like abuse or abandonment, you know, other kind of really heinous crimes that have impacted their lives, and they're still waiting for those trial dates. And as you said, the prison places are filling up, in fact, overfilled, and now people are going to prison for things they've said on social media. We don't have space for people to be in prison for what they've said on social media, and it looks like you're just going to take out prisoners from prisons and replace them with a new batch of so-called far-right protesters.
Well, it's fascinating, isn't it, Luke? Because they've managed to find 500 prison places out of absolutely nowhere. HMP Stocken in Rutland, HMP Cookham Wood in Kent. Now, we will come on to that, but it is complex. But Starmer is saying that it's the rapid sentencing which is causing a reduction in the violent protests that we're seeing. I was just talking to a guest saying that actually it's too early to say whether that is the case, but it does seem strange that it's happened so quickly.
Well, I think, first of all, the issues with the prison service, the courts, the police are long-standing, and they're the result of years of underinvestment. Yeah. And I think, you know, that needs to be addressed as a priority. I think with cases like this, where you've got violent mobs rampaging around the country, looting businesses, burning down or trying to burn down buildings, literally trying to kill people, you have to act swiftly and decisively and get them, you know, into prison. I think prison's primary function, obviously, is to deter, to punish, to rehabilitate. But I think the most important thing about prison is to protect the wider society by taking people who are dangerous off the streets and confining them. I mean, and these people are clearly, you know, when you've got angry mobs rampaging around the country trying to kill people, I think getting them off the streets and confining them to take the heat out of the situation is an urgent priority.
What's causing the riots?
Well, I think there are lots of things that are causing them. I thought there was a really good article this week in The Guardian by Larry Elliott noting that there weren't any riots in places like Cambridge, Winchester, St Albans, places where I think people would have been just as angry and appalled about the murder of those poor girls in Southport as they were in other places. But in those types of towns in southeast England, people have nice homes, good jobs, prosperous lives. I think in large swathes of the places where we've seen the worst violence, you know, people on lower incomes, the quality of jobs is not so good. The educational outcomes in particular are very poor, particularly amongst young men. And I think that's a sort of driver of makes people angry and frustrated sort of generally. And also I think it makes them more susceptible to misinformation online because they haven't got, you know, been imbued with the kind of critical skills to process it more sceptically. So I think that's a hugely important and under-discussed part of this.
So do I. There's another very good article in The Telegraph. The British migrant dream is thriving, saying that actually immigration is a really key part of this country. Immigration has always underpinned this country. In fact, we're a country of immigrants. We all are. But actually, it goes on to say that actually, immigration in this country is much more successful than in many other countries. And, of course, we had a Prime Minister who, a Hindu Prime Minister, a Buddhist Home Secretary, a Muslim Mayor of London, a Muslim First Minister of Scotland, and a Black First Minister of Wales. So it does show that, actually, you can come into this country and you can rise to the highest level.
Yeah, and we have such an incredibly success story to tell about successful migration in this country, and the cultural richness and productivity that it has brought is much to celebrate. But I think people's problem is not so much migration as a whole. I don't think the majority of people who are concerned about migration numbers going up are driven by racism. They are driven by the concern of split resources and also integration. So they are very welcoming to people who come to this country, who take on our values, who integrate with our communities, who become part of the fabric of our society and add so much. Their concerns, and I think, you know, invalidly expressed through riots, absolutely, but valid concerns are about different types of migration, and we can't pretend that they are all the same. And different types of migration where there is not that integration, where there is not that taking on of British values, that's where the concerns are raised.
And your point about educational attainment is right. It's poor white boys, actually, who are being failed by the system, by the state, low educational attainment, poverty. And actually, I wonder what you make of that message that came in saying it's about unfairness.
In what sense?
People feel it's really unfair that if you've been waiting for a house, for example, if you can't get the job that you want, that they feel that they're being held back. Meanwhile, if you get on a boat and come here illegally, you get put in a hotel with heating.
I think it's important. I largely agree with what Sophia just said, that, you know, it's valid for people to be concerned about the extent of migration into this country and whether it's feasible and whether we have the resources to support it. So I think it's definitely valid to be concerned about that and to discuss it legitimately. I think it's important we don't demonise migrants. I think that you know, we're very lucky by accident of birth to have been born in a prosperous country. We haven't done anything to deserve that. It's just, as I say, accident of birth. People coming here have often had very, troubled lives. They're leaving places where there are appalling things going on. I think being stuck in a hotel, confined to a hotel in around England in various places where or other places migrants are being housed, they don't have a dream lifestyle. I understand that.
Well, it's a lot better than where they came from, and
exactly. But
they're not confined.
But they can't. They're restricted on what they can do, whether they can work and such like. The point I'm making is that it's not, a great lifestyle, and I can understand why people in Britain who find their own lives frustrating might be sort of generally angry, and that's a sort of a channel for their frustrations. But I think it's important that we are proportionate and measured in the way we discuss this. I don't think, obviously there are some criminal elements amongst migrants. There are criminal elements amongst the British population as well. I don't think it's sort of one is more criminal or less criminal than the other. I think we need to keep a sense of proportion when discussing this and speak about migrants in a humane and understanding way, while also legitimately discussing to what extent can we support migration.
Well, that's right, and of course the vast cost to the state as well that illegal immigration has caused to this country. Let's pause it there for a minute. I have to go to a break. After the break, we'll continue with our conversation. This is Talk. Welcome back, 8:35 on Saturday, August the 10th. I'm David Bull. This is Weekend Breakfast. Right, we're in the middle of head-to-head with Luke Hildyard and Sophia Worringer. We've been talking about immigration, and Boris Johnson this morning is attacking Keir Starmer. Boris Johnson says Sir Keir Starmer's response to the riots shows he's deaf to public concerns over immigration. The former Prime Minister claims Sir Keir had failed to understand the root causes of unrest across Britain. We've talked about that, but also Keir Starmer keeps calling it far-right thuggery, and he insists that all those who took part in rioting would face the full force of the law. Now, of course, obviously, Sir Keir Starmer, in his infinite wisdom, has removed the Rwanda scheme. He also has closed the Bibi Stockholm barge. He's granting amnesty to people coming into this country. I just wonder, Sophia, if he when I came back, he just kept banging on about far-right thuggery, and I don't think that's very clever wordsmith like work. I can't even say it myself. I don't think. Thank you, wordsmanship. I don't think that has helped matters.
I agree, because those who have concerns about immigration are not just the far right. It is a vast majority of the population, in fact. And I think there was a poll that said over a third of the population would support peaceful protests, you know, expressing these concerns. So if he labels them all as far right, I know there are some that are far right. I know there's some that are rent-a-mob and those who are just going out every time they get an opportunity to loot and they jump on the bandwagon, absolutely. And they need to be condemned, and they need to, as we've talked about, we need to, you know, come down harshly on those, because that is not the right way to go about expressing your concerns. But if he labels them all far right, they will move to the far right, because they will feel like that's the only part of the political system that expresses their views, and he will alienate them even further. So he needs to be really careful about his language, and he also needs to address the fact that they have valid concerns. We've talked about the fact they're not expressing them in the right way, but if he just completely ignores their concerns, it does really pull into this idea of two-tier policing, you know, double standards on what is allowed to be said and what is not allowed to be said. A few weeks ago we had riots in Leeds, in Hare Hills, and the response to that was very different to the response that we've got when it's kind of white working class people that are rioting or protesting, however you kind of on that spectrum. So there are some very concerning things that the Prime Minister has said, and I think that he needs to be careful about the language he uses.
To you?
I slightly am going to disagree here, because I think, you know, as I say, we've had, as I was saying earlier, we've had people literally mobs rampaging around the country, trying to kill people, trying to burn down buildings, looting businesses.
We've had a lot of law-abiding citizens taking to the streets who are deeply concerned about the direction this country is going in.
Sure, but I think, you know, when you've got the priority is to stop the mobs from burning down buildings and from killing people.
But he is labelling everyone as far right.
I don't think he is. I think he's talking about the people who are. I think he's talking about the people who are trying to, you know, attack mosques and setting fire to cars and things. I don't think he was talking about the far right thuggery. You know, the literal thuggery, the people attacking people.
Right? And what's far right? Because again, this is banding around.
I think sort of I described sort of trying to, you know, mobs trying to destroy a mosque and having to be protected from the police.
That's not a far right. What's far right?
I think in fact it's, you know, they're targeting them because they're targeting the mosque because it's a mosque, because it's an Islamic building, because they hate Muslims.
Right? Because this is what I'm trying to get my head around.
I think yes. I think if you want to violently attack a building of the people in it because of their religion, that it's the fact it's their religion and it's a religious building that they want to attack it.
But there are lots of people who are right of centre who aren't thugs.
Exactly, completely.
Yeah.
I completely agree with that.
But isn't it lazy language? Which is Sophia's point.
No, to describe people who are trying to destroy buildings and attack people as far
But that's not everyone.
But that's who he's talking about, and that's the immediate problem. I think it is. I think it is. I think that's who he's talking about when he says far right thuggery.
I think it's just very
right.
I just think it's very clumsy, this language.
I think there were far right thugs. There were far right thugs involved.
Yes.
This was far right thuggery. The problem was buildings being smashed up, businesses being looted, people being attacked, and that had to be stopped, and he had to, you know, call it out for what it was, which was far-right thuggery. I don't think at all he was saying that anyone concerned about immigration
but what he should have said, I understand people's frustration, and there is an element of far-right thuggery which will stamp out.
I think saying, I think there are lots of things, as we were talking about earlier, that are behind this. You know, we were talking about economic problems, educational attainment. I think, you know, you talk about that once you've sorted out the problem of
I agree with
businesses being looted, people being attacked, mosques being set upon. I think then comes, once you've, you know, stabilised and, you know, kept the peace, as it were, that's when the time comes to start talking about the sort of root causes of this.
OK, I do think I have to take a break at this point, but after the break I just want to talk about Sadiq Khan, because I think he's adding fuel to the fire as well. We'll do that after this break. This is Talk. Good morning. Welcome back. This is Talk, 8:45 now on Saturday, August the 10th. Just watching the producer crawling under the desk at the moment to try and stay out of shot, which I'm enjoying enormously. Welcome back. Welcome back. We're in the middle of the head-to-head with Luke Hillchild and Sophia Worringer. He's now crawling behind my chair. But anyway, right, I just want to talk about Sadiq Khan. He's wading into this, Luke. Actually, I'll start with Sophia, actually, because I had a bit of a go at you earlier. Sadiq Khan says he's not safe in this country. country. He's an openly Muslim politician. I'm not safe. No, I'm triggered by the events last week. He's heartbroken that his children's generation has felt scared. He says, no, I'm not safe because I have to have police protection. You have police protection because you're the Mayor of London.
He does have police protection because he's the Mayor of London, and that is true. But I do think it is sad that we're seeing this return to kind of more identity-driven sectarian politics where people don't feel safe. We saw that expressed through the independents voted into Parliament in the general election, and this very kind of identity-driven politics. So it's sad that he feels that, and it's really heartbreaking in the same way, you know, that lots of Jews in this country
but
also feel
he could have said
unsafe.
something much better, which is that this country is very welcoming. As a Muslim, I feel that the vast majority of people get on in this country and that we look after each other. This is divisive, what he is saying.
And also London is actually one of the success stories on welcoming, you know, migrants and people from ethnic minorities and integrating 100%. Them and having a I think it's one of the best places to be someone who is not white in terms of feeling welcomed and part of the community. And it's different, very different, if you're living in other parts of the country. So maybe he should have celebrated London's multiculturalism, as you said, rather than saying that it's something that he is fearful of. But obviously I don't want to dismiss his concerns, and what his children are experiencing in school may be very different from what he experiences as a politician. But I do think, yeah, he's protected because he's the mayor.
Luke, I know you're going to disagree with me.
Yeah, with some trepidation. I mean, I suspect the protection that Sadiq Khan requires is greater than the protection that the mayor of Teesside or Leeds requires. Maybe because London's a bit bigger, but he does seem to inspire a lot of anger that I think goes beyond legitimate political difference. I mean, there was a good story in Private Eye recently about how anything related to Sadiq Khan in online journalist stories tends to get huge traffic from America because the fact that there's a Muslim mayor of London, people on the right in America are very worked up about that. So there's an incentive for journalists in Britain to write kind of sensationalist stories about Sadiq Khan. I think he gets, I think coming back to what Sophia says, I think it's important that we shouldn't be, dare I say, too snowflakey about his comments this week and take it too personally. I think it's fair enough when people have been, when we've seen the scenes we've seen, people are trying to attack mosques and burn down buildings and so on, that, he says, as a prominent Muslim, that many Muslims are feeling a little sort of frightened in that context. I think that's fair enough.
I live in the East End. Of London. I would like to know, and in terms of multiculturalism, I'm surrounded by people who don't speak English, who cover their faces, who cover their heads, who haven't integrated into this country, and so those kind of comments play badly with the indigenous East Enders who can see that their community has changed beyond belief.
And I think, it's fair enough. Equally, it's completely fair enough for people to have concerns about immigration and assimilation. Yeah. I think, I just think there's a sort of time and a place and a space for those concerns to be aired, and also for people who are of the Muslim faith to acknowledge that it's been a very difficult time for them over the past
I think a lot of the anger directed at Sadiq Khan has nothing to do with who he is. It's his record in London. We've had record tube strikes. We've not built as many affordable homes as the city needs. In fact, the target for homes in London has decreased under the Labour government. They've now brought it down, and people feel unsafe on the streets. Even though crime's come down, that police presence is strong. I think a lot of it is policy, not personal.
Also, very quickly, Labour is warned over their attempts to define Islamophobia. I'm deeply concerned about this as well, whether there is an agreed description of anti-Muslim prejudice. The whole point about this is actually the prejudice, it shouldn't be around anything, whether it's religion, sexuality or whatever. I'm deeply concerned that when you've also got government wading in with definitions, that by definition you're going to run into problems, aren't you?
Well, I think there needs to, I think hate crimes do need to be criminal and
but don't we already have legal legislation? I mean, I'm
not a legal scholar, so I probably wouldn't be able to comment too authoritatively.
So we have a definition of anti-Semitism which is widely agreed. So there is precedent there. I think the problem with the definition that is being proposed of Islamophobia is that it potentially could include the inability to criticise elements of Islam, and that is very concerning. All religions need to have that ability to criticise, to debate, to point out things in that religion that people disagree with, and I think the narrowing definition is what concerns the people that aren't able to call it out.
And talking about calling things out, a secret government agency used to spy on anti-lockdown campaigners. Do you remember in the COVID pandemic? This was the CDU, the Counter Disinformation Unit, has been rebranded as the National Security Online Information Team, NSOIT, and essentially it has trusted flagger status, so it means that it goes through people's social media and then can flag those posts to the social media providers and tells them to take it down.
That unit in COVID was initially set up to disinformation about things that were untrue, but then started to flag people who were disagreeing with COVID policy. And actually, a lot of the dissent that was articulated at the time was then proven to be true later down the line.
We saw Carl Hennigan, Molly Kingsley, for example, all of those flagged. I know that Dr. Rennie was flagged. I was flagged.
People were expressing concern about the impact of lockdown, and that was put as a kind of anti-conspiracy, conspiracy theory position. And that has been borne out in the COVID inquiry. We've seen the devastating impact of lockdown and the still long consequences that particularly our children and young people are facing. So, yeah, I'm very concerned that this stealth under the radar, people don't even realise they're on the system, is going to be, wider spread and going to really stifle freedom of speech.
What about the freedom of speech? This channel is all about the freedom of speech, and this country should be about freedom of speech as well.
I think it's a really tricky question because obviously, nobody could disagree with what Sophia has just said around not wanting the government to be preventing people from expressing opinions online. Clearly, though, we do have a massive issue with people disseminating misinformation, lies, incitement to violence online. You don't have the freedom of speech to shout fire in a crowded theatre, as the old chestnut goes.
Quite.
So I think that's a real issue that has to be contested, and it is a difficult one to balance with concerns around freedom of speech.
OK, very quickly, I just want to move on. A sandwich business is set to offer customers seagull insurance. This is because of dive-bombing birds stealing food from terrified customers. This is the Cheesy Toast Shack in St Andrews. Apparently, you buy a sandwich, which is a very expensive sandwich, £6.75. You go outside, people take a photo of it for social media. Seagulls come in, take sandwich away. So now they are saying, right, we're going to add £1 onto the cost of the sandwich as insurance, so that if it gets nicked by the seagulls, you get another sandwich. Good or a bad idea? Would you pay the £1?
I think fair enough, yeah, because I think if the business is losing money, they've been out of the goodness of their heart.
Apparently they're replacing 10 sandwiches a day.
If they're goodness out of that, out of the goodness of their heart, they have been making that up. It's not really their responsibility. Particularly, I think there are signs that say, beware aggressive seagulls. So they are being kind and giving the crying baby that's lost its food a replacement. So I think fair enough.
I don't think it's a baby.
How much of the sandwich has to be still intact before you can return it?
And it's going to be done on trust, I think. So maybe you could
and you'd have to have a loss adjuster involved. You'd have to send it off with a complaint form. Georgie, would you pay £1 as insurance?
No. No, I wouldn't. And I wouldn't take photos of my food for social media. Just eat it, for goodness sake.
We lost our suitcase on a flight. I won't name the airline or the insurance company, but it was in February. We lost the suitcase. We've had confirmation the suitcase is lost. We had insurance for a lost suitcase, and we're still waiting for a payout in August. So I think I hope the insurance providers of the sandwich are better than the ones we got.
When I was in the European Parliament, I came back on the train, put my suitcase in the train, and these young lads ran onto the train, nicked my suitcase, and ran off. I'm not even kidding.
Wow.
I did actually get the insurance on that in the end. But anyway, I don't know why I told you that, but there we are. I thought it was interesting. Right, thank you very much indeed, both of you. Luke Hill-Jones, author of Enough, Why It's Time to Abolish the Super Rich, and director at the High Pay Centre, and Sophia Worringer, Deputy Policy Director at the Centre for Social Justice.